Hello, this is the off-campus coaching video for those that will be leading small groups, off-campus small groups, facilitating those groups following the message for Sunday, November the 24th. So if your group is meeting following that message, this is a coaching video for you. As always, what we're going to need is 2 or 3 things in place. One, you need the discussion guide. You should have received that in the email with the link for this video, your Bible, and a pen to take a couple of notes for you. And what we're going to try to do is just give you some things to help you as you facilitate or lead your group and your small group discussion the week following the November the 24th message. As usual, in our discussion guide, the first discussion point is always giving you an opportunity to review what you heard Sunday. Give the group an opportunity for everybody to kind of respond to that and kind of give a moment to kind of recall what they heard, what things they walked away with, some things that stuck in their mind, some things that they've been thinking about since that Sunday morning message. And as usual, it's not bad for a little bit moment of silence there when you kind of ask that question or get the group started. If nobody responds right off the bat, silence is not necessarily a bad thing. We don't like silence. It makes us uncomfortable, kind of seems a little awkward, but it basically gives everybody a chance to think through what they've heard on Sunday and maybe get prepared to give a response after, some time, maybe 30, 45 seconds, a minute. If nobody answers or comes up with something, you might give a prompter, just something that you walked away with from that morning to help get the discussion started. But that's always a helpful time, giving your group an opportunity to kind of rehash, recall what you learned that morning as you get ready to go into your discussion on some specifics of that. Discussion point number 2 deals with this topic that we addressed in the Sunday morning message on being an influencer or being an influencer. Kind of gives you an opportunity to discuss that, talk about that. What is an influencer, or who are the influencers in your life, as well as those that you influence. Every one of us have a circle of influence. We may not think of that, but we all have people around us that we are an influence upon in one way or the other. Sometimes it's our own family members. Sometimes it's maybe co-workers, friends, neighbors. If you're in a classroom, a teacher, or even other students, if you're a student. And we're all in those, have those circles of influences that we're involved in. We want to give you an opportunity, your group, the opportunity to think that through, because sometimes we may think that we're not an influencer, but the reality is every one of us is. And so we want to talk about that and also talk about how we hope to influence others. What are some things that we want to influence them in? Hopefully these will be positive things, and I'm sure they will be. But what we're, want to just prompt your group to think through that. How do I want to influence them? I want to influence them, maybe those around us that are not believers, and influencing them in a way that they would embrace the gospel, that they would put their faith in Christ. Those that are growing in their faith, how can I influence them to stay on that journey of spiritual growth and maybe challenge them to grow in even greater ways and better and more ways? So that's what we're talking about, being an influencer. Of course, obviously as a parent, you influence your children, and there's some things you want to influence them to. You want to help them to grow to be adults that productive and have a productive part of their life, not only in society but in their own families. You want them to be adults that are walking with God, growing spiritually, and so forth. There. Discussion number 3, we kind of direct our attention to Psalm chapter 1, and we're going to read the first 3 verses of that psalm. And we're going to talk about there right off the bat. It talks about a blessed person, a blessed man. Blessed is the man, and talks about what that looks like. And I want to give your group an opportunity to kind of think through this sense of what does it mean to be blessed? Is this just dealing with material, physical things, the state we find ourselves in, or does it go deeper than that? Kind of think through, what does it mean to be a blessed person, and what do we think of as a blessed person? Oftentimes our thoughts go directly to the physical, spiritual parts of spiritual blessings in our life, but we want you to dig a little bit deeper in that. Think about what a blessed person is. What is it that characterizes a blessed person? In other words, we're looking at a blessed person, a man that walks with God, a man that follows God, or a person rather that follows God, a person that's following God's will, seeking to know God. A blessed person is a person that influences others around them in a positive way, in a way that points other people to God. A blessed person is one that is having their own character developed and transformed. Those are the kind of things we're talking about when we talk about what a blessed person is. And give your group an opportunity to discuss that and think that through. Discussion point number 3, I want you to go back to verse 1 and focus especially on those 3 verbs that are in that verse, the verbs of walk, sit, or stand, and sit. And what I want you to do is help your group see the progression that happens in there. It says a blessed man doesn't do these things. He doesn't walk with sinners. He doesn't stand with the wicked. He doesn't sit with scoffers. And notice the progression of that. You go from a kind of incidental meeting with someone to more of an intentional interaction. To then, thirdly, where the word seat there is making reference to the fact that you invite them into your life. You give them a place of prominence. They have a place of influence in your life, and maybe become the primary influence in your life. And I want you to look at that, give group an opportunity to talk about that and see the relationship there from one verb to the next, and also see how that progression kind of gets more involved with each one of those verbs there. And then in discussion number 5, we want to kind of think through exactly what this progression was talking about, because what you have there is the psalmist is illustrating through that spiritual digression that can happen in our lives, and in an unhealthy way, and not in a way that's negative, not positive. When we have those in our lives that become influencers of us, that influence us in a way that draws us away from God, instead of a way that helps us grow closer to God. And so we want to help the group think that through, and notice that the subtleness of that. How often that can be happening and we not even notice it, not be even aware of it. And we need to see, want our group to think through how the people around us are influencing us, and really let them think through, are the people around us influencing us in a way that's healthy, spiritually healthy, or in a way that's spiritually unhealthy? Discussion number 6 just really wants us to kind of follow up on that. Discussion point number 6, on what are the greatest influences in your life? Who have been the greatest influencers in your life? And why have they been the influencers? Think about the position they've played in your life, and what was it that allowed, what was it about them that you allowed them to become the influencer in your life? And then how did they influence you? Not only how did they influence you, in what direction did they influence you, but what were the means that they used to influence you? What were the avenues of influence that they use, to carry out that influence? Discussion point number 7, I want you to go back and look at the verses 2 and 3, because there's a contrast. Verse 1 talks about a blessed man doesn't do these things. Verse 2 talks about then how a blessed man avoids getting caught up into that sinful progression that's pointed out in verse 1. And I want you to give your group an opportunity to see that contrast and to think that through in your discussion. And as you're doing that, notice that, and this is something to kind of help guide your group in, that it talks about the blessed man is the one who begins to focus in, meditate, read, think through the scriptures. And as your group is talking about that, obviously it's talking about that we need to be spending time in our Bibles. But don't let it just be thinking about, well, we just read our Bible and discover the things it tells us to do and not to do there. But think through, what's the Bible's ultimate goal? The ultimate goal of the Bible is not necessarily to give us a list of do's or don'ts. The ultimate goal of the Bible that God has put there is for us to see who God is. The Bible is more than just an instruction manual for life. The Bible reveals to us who God is. So we're thinking through that, as your group is talking through that and thinking that through. You might need to nudge them a little bit to helping them see that what the psalmist is telling us there is we need to replace those influences in our lives that can lead us down a path of sin, to replace them with the greatest influencer of all, God himself. And when God is the greatest influencer in our life, when he's the strongest influencer in our life, no matter who else is around us, we're always going to choose the path that is right, the path that is good, and the path that is holy. And as you think through that, and as you look through that, there are some scriptures for you to look at in that help you with that. And also you can go back to the sermon, especially in Proverbs chapter 27, see how that ties in to what we talked about Sunday morning, about God being the greatest, strongest influence in our life. And when he is the greatest, strongest influence in our life, what does our life look like? Our life looks like a blessed man. And Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23 helps us kind of see what that's like, because in verse 3, it tells us there that a blessed man is one like a tree that is healthy and is vibrant, that produces fruit, and it's good fruit. It's fruit that is good for the tree, but also fruit that benefits other people around them. And the fruit we're is talking about there is we have some insight in what that looks like through Galatians chapter 5, verse 22-23. Talks about the fruit of the Spirit. So give your small group an opportunity to maybe look through that. Maybe take a few minutes and just discuss together those 9 aspects of the fruit of the Spirit, and how that kind of gets worked out in our life. What does that look like? And that a man who's under the control, the submission to the Spirit of God, that's the kind of character that they're going to have, and then that character that we have is going to influence other people around us. In discussion point number 8, we give you an opportunity to kind of look at an Old Testament example of a man, a young man, who was literally thrown into an environment that was filled with negative, filled with ungodly, filled with unhealthy influences. And see at how he responded to that. And we're talking about the Old Testament character named Joseph. And so you're going to be looking in chapter 29, Genesis chapter 39, where there's an incident recorded of us there for Joseph's life. Joseph had been, as a slave, had been sold in slavery to Egypt. He eventually ended up in the household of a guy named Potiphar, who was a very prominent Egyptian. Joseph was a gifted young man and had a great managerial skills, and was able to put them into place so that he grew. That Potiphar began to give him a lot more responsibility in the household. So ultimately, he was kind of running the household and basically running Potiphar's business and handling all of those things. And in doing that, he was also caught the attention of Potiphar's wife, and she had an invitation for him that was not a good one. It was a sinful invitation. In fact, she was so bold that she basically just kind of gave an invite to him. It was a unhealthy invitation to him, an unhealthy influence to enter into a sinful activity with her. And what we're going to want your group to do is they read through that, see how Joseph responded to that influence or that invitation. And then we want to relate that to how do we respond to those sinful influences around us, or those sinful invitations that we receive. And seeing especially how that ties into Psalm 1. And looking at the progression of those sinful influences in chapter 1, and then how we can avoid falling into that progression from verses 2 and 3. And wrap up your time in discussion point number 9 by looking at 2 Timothy 2:22, which kind of reinforces what you just talked about there in Joseph 39, where it tells us that we are to flee flee from sin. You're not to try to mess around with it. You don't try to resist it. You are to flee from it, because our sinful nature likes the enticement that temptation brings. And when it's allowed to stay there, our sinful nature is going to grab hold of it and indulge itself in it. And so we're told to flee from it. We need to take a minute for your group to kind of look, what does that look like in your life? What does it mean to flee from sin in that? In Joseph's case, he literally physically removed himself from that environment. Well, that's not necessarily possible every time. So what does it mean to flee from from those temptations, those influences that are around us? How do we flee from those? And give your group an opportunity to kind of think that through together. Physically removing yourself, you may not be, if you're surrounded by sinful influences on the job, you can't necessarily maybe have the ability to remove yourself from that job. So how do you flee from those influences? If you're a student and you're in an environment where there's unhealthy influences around you. You can't remove yourself from that class or remove yourself from that college. How do you flee from those things? So think that to get through together, and I think you'll come up with some good things to help one another and challenge one another in that way. And as you do that, see if you can come up with a closing sentence or closing statement that would summarize what you've been talking about. Maybe something like this. It would be to avoid sinful influences, I'm going to need to make sure that God is the greatest influencer in my life. Maybe it'd be something like this. If I'm going to be a godly influence on others, then I need to make sure that God is the greatest influencer in my life. And then maybe talk about how does that happen through the scriptures, through prayer, through worship, and so forth there. Hey, have a great time discussion with your group this week. I know that you find this always to be a profitable and encouraging time. I know I do with my small group, and it's always a great time for us to get together. By the way, your small group is a place of influence. When you get together with your small group, what you're doing is influencing each other, and you're influencing each other in healthy ways. You're influencing each other in godly ways because you're challenging one another. You're encouraging one another to grow in your relationship with Christ. And so one of the things, keep in mind that as a part of this small group, you are an influencer to others. They are an influence upon you. And be encouraged that you are surrounded yourself with people who are seeking the same thing as you are. They're seeking to know God, seeking to grow in their relationship with God. And you are, by doing that, you are not only being influenced by having good, right influences in your life, but you're also being a good influence to others. So, enjoy your time with your small group. Have a great time influencing one another this week. God bless.